32 teams in 32 days. This is episode 3 of the 32 teams in 32 days podcast. The San Francisco 49ers episode was supposed to be the Miami Dolphins episode, but from yesterday's news, we have to adjust. Let's welcome in Leo Luna, reporter for 49ers Goldmine and co-host on the 49ers Nation podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Leo Luna93. Leo, what's up, my man?
Oh man, what's going on? It's definitely extraordinary times, vivid times, exciting times in 49ers land. So, still trying to bask it in. Like, man, this team really made that move. It's surreal at this moment.
Yeah, it's like these draft moves can just come out of nowhere. And I remember the Browns trade or the trade for Mariota that the Titans made, or
Mhm.
I'm sorry, the Titans trading down for I don't remember who it was, but the Titans traded down, and then the Rams traded up, and then the Eagles traded up. So it was the Wentz and Goff year where the Eagles and
Well,
Rams both traded up, and like both those moves happened, I believe, within a week, and
mhm.
like a month before the draft, these moves just come out of nowhere, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But let's start with free agency. Then we'll kind of ease our way into the stuff we're all here for. Of course, yesterday's blockbuster, but I think it goes underrated how important it is to keep your stars in this league. A la insert Trent Williams came over via trade last offseason, had a great year, was a pending free agent, and then cashed in. We all know the story. But 6 years, almost $140 million, with over 50 million guaranteed. He was the Niners' top priority all offseason, was keeping this guy, and they did. They kept him away from Kansas City and other strong competition. When healthy, the best left tackle in football, probably. How excited were you for this move? When this move was made?
Well, I'm very excited for this move because I've never been a guy that's like, let's run it back. Because if you have middle tier guys that could, you know, not turn out well in year 2, year 3 of those contracts. With Trent Williams, that's a different circumstance to what you alluded to. He's the best left tackle in the league. So running it back with a guy of his talent level is absolutely amazing if you could go ahead and retain those type of players. I think it's the same thing with Jason Frey. I believe PFF had him about ranked the 8th best cover corner in the NFL, and truly watching every single defensive snap of this team, Jason Verrett showcased that with the amazing feet work to stick on these receivers. Jaquaski Tart, he's a guy who doesn't really get brought up much nationally or in the 49ers fan base, yet his passer rating against was 50 points lower than the other guys that were in there replacing him, whether when Tart was out for injury. So the guys that they're running it back with are nearly top 10, top 12 players at their positions rather than being 15 and lower. So that's the thing. They weren't running it back with middle tier guys. They're running it back with guys that were at the top of the market at their position. And I didn't even mention K'Wan Williams, who's, in my mind, when healthy, which wasn't the case last year, but he is probably the best nickel corner in the game when healthy.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jason Verrett obviously coming back with Richard Sherman probably out the door. Where does your cornerback room sit right now? Is that a definite need in the draft, or are you pretty confident in that DB room right now?
It's a definite need in the draft, but I'm also confident with it currently. It's a definite need to where it's future years, because how I look at these guys, they all essentially signed 1 year deals. Jason Verrett, 1 year deal. Emmanuel Mosley, they re-signed, which I like. I like his talent level quite a bit, but it could be looked at as a 1 year deal, even though that it's 2 years on paper. Then you have Jimmy Ward, fantastic player. Jaquaski Tart, fantastic player, but a 1 year deal as well. And so you have that need because if you're going to bring in some young guys, some rookies now, let's bring them in now where you're not forcing them to start day one and at least have a year under the system.
Yeah, and corner was a commonly mocked position for you guys at 12. Now picking 3, not sure that's a feasible possibility, picking a defensive back at 3rd overall. But you still have another pick in the top 45. So potentially that could be a move that John Lynch goes to. But so D'Amico Ryan's your new DC. Mike McDaniel will now be the lone offensive coordinator as Mike LaFleur, who was basically co-offensive coordinator with McDaniels off the Jets with Coach Saleh. How are we feeling with this switch? Because I've said for months that Mike McDaniel is going to be a head coach somewhere very soon, and one might think he decided to stay in San Fran because he's going to be a head coach in this league very, very soon.
Yeah, that's very true. He is a very smart coach. The way he's able to draw up run plays, and a coach like Kyle Shanahan, who's known to have quite a bit of pride, whether it's to his players or to the game itself. He put his pride away for a second just to give McDaniel some more opportunity to, whether if it was an offensive coordinator job this year, where I don't expect McDaniel to call very many plays, but McDaniel is going to be a head coach very, very soon. And the guy's probably just as smart as Kyle Shanahan when it's drawing up plays. And a big advocate for him is Kyle Juszczyk. And they're like freaking big time friends, and the way they relate and see the game together. A lot of that zone run blocking scheme that Shanahan gets the credit for, a lot of that is drawn up by Mike McDaniel, and Kyle Shanahan even says that himself. So Kyle Shanahan understands the importance of McDaniel to say, you know what, I'm going to give you the OC job because I'm not going to have somebody poach you away just for an OC job. If someone's going to take you away from me, it's because you're going to be a head coach, just like Robert Saleh was.
Yep. Then that's a great point, because so shifting gears a little bit, I want to get your thoughts on one thing. So obviously Saleh goes to the Jets, and most people would agree it was one of, if not the best coaching hire, because he's a culture guy. He's going to come in and change things there. But the negative people are like, okay, don't hire a defensive head coach, because if you do, your offensive coordinator is going to be a revolving position for the next 5-10 years of just constant coordinators coming in and then leaving for head coaching jobs. And I'm sitting here saying, well, the biggest dynasty in sports was built off a defensive head coach. So like, I've never understood that notion, because obviously Shanahan, he had his defensive coach leave, probably going to now have his offensive coordinator leave, and he's most likely going to be just fine.
The biggest thing is if you get the quarterback right. So like you said, Bill Belichick, defensive minded coach, that's a freaking 20-year dynasty. The Seattle Seahawks, they're in the playoffs and talking about NFC championships conversation every single year in the preseason. They're in that conversation. Pete Carroll's a defensive head coach, but he has Russell Wilson. So if the Jets could figure out the quarterback position, Sam Darnold does have talent. I'm not as high as on him, but they do have that second overall pick to where they could go ahead and select one of those guys. But the great thing about Saleh is he comes from the Kyle Shanahan tree, to where if LaFleur gets a head coaching job somewhere, well, cool. Saleh has those relationships with guys under Shanahan, and Saleh and Shanahan are very, very close, to where if he needs to replace someone, Shanahan's just a phone call away from Saleh saying, hey, what do you think about this guy? Hey, what do you think about that guy? And it doesn't have to come from necessarily the San Francisco coaching staff that he's asking him about. It could come from the Green Bay coaching staff, where it's a very similar system. It could come from the Rams coaching staff, which is a very similar system. Even the Browns, very similar system. And Shanahan's going to know a lot of those guys and understand their level thinking, because a lot of it is just very the same language when talking about that West Coast offense.
So that's about it for the kind of offseason free agency. Niners have a ton of pieces coming back from injury, and they're surely going to be back in the saddle. I would assume they're my early Super Bowl pick, actually, in the NFC. But of course, yesterday the news came, traded up for the third pick. What were your initial thoughts on the move? Just happened about 25 hours ago.
So my initial thoughts was like, is did this just happen? Because there was a lot of hope of it wanting to happen. Um, like I like Jimmy Garoppolo, but you could tell when a guy's not it. And that was the case. It's to where, all right, the 49ers are sitting at 12. If they want to go get their guy, like there's not too many drafts where you can have a Trevor Lawrence, a Zach Wilson, and a Justin Fields as your top three quarterbacks. And with the 49ers sitting at 12, it's just make the move because with the way this roster is constructed for next season, this is going to be a team that's probably picking in the 20s. Could be mid 20s, could be low 20s, it could be high 20s, or it could be 32. Um, but with the way the roster is, there's no thinking that you could jump right back into the top 10 so easily, or even the top 5 if you're picking in the 20s. It becomes very more difficult than what they gave up with those 2 first round picks, essentially, because I look at the third first round pick. Well, those are crossed because you're just swapping picks. You essentially gave up 2 ones, which is the price Seattle paid for Jamal Adams, and that's not even the quarterback position. So I'm just glad that they finally did it. There was a lot of buzz coming around, like, oh, they're looking at Sam Darnold, they looked at Carson Wentz, they called on Teddy Bridgewater. So it's like a lot of outside noise that could become very toxic for your quarterback, for your other players. Just everybody buying in and knowing that they're looking at a different quarterback every single offseason. Well, now you could just kind of eliminate that noise and say, hey, this is our guy, at least minimum the next 4 years. Could be 5, but minimum the next 4 years, this is our guy.
Yeah, and to a point where they're calling on Bridgewater, they're calling on Darnold, 2 quarterbacks that I don't think are better than Jimmy Garoppolo. As good as Jimmy's been playing in the lone healthy year, the full season he made a Super Bowl, but it just might be a case of he just like they're a very aggressive organization. The Niners might just be over him not being able to stay on the field because the injuries has just killed him. And he's just like they just might be over it.
Yeah, that's where I salute the 49ers front office and coaching staff. It's like they know they could win with Jimmy Garoppolo. They completely understand it. The hard thing about it is you're comparing Jimmy Garoppolo's win-loss record to guys like Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard, who are probably practice squad quarterbacks and not NFL starters. But the the fact that they just went ahead and decided to do the move, 1, because of availability, 2, because of the contract number, and 3, he stated this after playing against Josh Allen. He's understanding that there's different ways to become a great NFL quarterback. You can't just, be just a pocket passer, like a very cerebral type quarterback. There's different ways. Athleticism is becoming huge in a part of the game. You have edge rushers now running a sub 4.4. So Shanahan, the fact that they understand that they're growing and they're adapting the way the NFL is going in the future, it's very respectable because a lot of people would say, no, this is my way or the highway.
Yeah, so let's talk about pick 3. Everyone assumes it's going to be quarterback, and I'm kind of in that boat too. I think if you trade up multiple first round picks, trade up 9 spots, you're taking a quarterback, whether or not they like Jimmy G. I mean, I assume they do, but at some point you have to move on. So as of now, it's gonna be Trevor gone. We assume probably Zach Wilson goes number 2. So in that case, you're deciding between Justin Fields and Trey Lance. And it was interesting to me yesterday because Schefter reported that the Niners are going to hold on to Jimmy G, and that just might be coach speak. It just might be GM speak, or they might be serious. And because he does have that no trade clause. So if they were to draft Trey Lance, he could potentially sit. And a couple people think that, okay, you don't really sit quarterbacks for a year anymore. But Niners are our team in win now mode. There's a lot of moving parts here. Do you lean on the Trey Lance side or the Justin Fields side?
So just really quick on the Jimmy G situation, I could see them going with him next year, depending which quarterback of the 2 they take. It's hard to keep a quarterback like that when you invest so much for your new quarterback to be the guy just to have him sit. With his no trade clause, he could get cut and the 49ers save the same amount of money. So the no trade clause isn't really an issue. And if it's New England's heavily interested in Jimmy Garoppolo. So if they say, hey, Jimmy, we got this trade offer from New England, just waive your no trade clause, he will gladly waive that no trade clause to go back to Bill Belichick. He still calls Bill Belichick coach, and he calls Kyle Shanahan Kyle. So that just shows the respect that he has there for Bill Belichick. And then I believe that the pick will be Justin Fields, not Trey Lance, because Justin Fields is ready to go now. Shanahan has worked with Justin Fields since Justin Fields was a teenager at the QB collective camps. So Shanahan understands the tools that this guy has. With shorts and a t-shirt on, he understands the tools when they break down plays and do film sessions. So he understands Justin Fields, and that's something I always thought about. Like, what is Kyle Shanahan's end game with this QB collective that he does? Is it just because he loves coaching high school kids? I doubt that. I think he wants to see the next wave of generational talents that's coming through high school, that's going to go through college, that could potentially be his quarterback of the future.
Yeah, so I'm gonna run something by you. So talk about okay, so it goes underrated how hard it is to go back to back. But also I was doing some research after this year's Super Bowl, and I wanted to figure out how many quarterbacks other than Tom Brady have lost a Super Bowl and then returned to one. So Brady did it a couple times, Manning did it once. And going back, the only other quarterback to do it this century is Kurt Warner, who lost with the Rams and then went back with a different team 9 years later. Going back even further, it was Jim Kelly in the early 90s to lose a Super Bowl and then go back. How do the Niners get back to the Super Bowl? Because history says it's very challenging.
Justin Fields. I think that's how they get back to the Super Bowl, because when you look at what this offense can be with the talent of Justin Fields, I don't think that they're asking too much of the quarterback position. A lot of it's pre-snap reads, so Justin Fields is going to have to get up to speed with that, understanding pre-snap looks from the defense and understand like where are they trying to trick you and make sure you don't fall in that trap. He's definitely going to have to understand that part of the game. But as far as talent, oh my God, it's a clear upgrade over Jimmy when it comes to talent. With his arm, the guy is supposedly going to run a 4.3 on his pro day at Ohio State. So there's that. I think that's how they do it. That was also my question on Jimmy G. It's like, you stick with Jimmy G. How many non-Hall of Famers lost a Super Bowl and got back? I can't think of one. I know, or at least came back and won a Super Bowl. The only one I could think of is John Elway.
John Elway was the last person not named Brady or Manning to lose a Super Bowl and then go back and win one.
Yeah, and that's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Is Jimmy G on the track to be a Hall of Fame quarterback? Nowhere near it. So that was my thing. It's like, okay, let's get this young talent. Let's get a rookie contract. And I think that's how they can get back to the Super Bowl, because when you have a rookie contract, you could build your team around it until that guy's ready to be paid.
So there were some rumors yesterday, and obviously there was a lot to unpack with the trade and everything that happened yesterday, especially with Miami moving back up to 6. So it was a crazy day, but stuck right in that rumor mill was Kyle Pitts at number 3, just to make the world go crazy. Where do you stand on that? I don't think it's going to happen, but where would you stand on a Kyle Pitts, George Kittle connection?
So I think there's a 0.0001% of that happening. But if we just imagine what that would look like, say if the 49ers stayed at pick 12 and did that, oh my God, I would have been all for it. You're sending out there, because Kyle Shanahan loves to run a lot of 22 personnel and 12 personnel. So that's whether 2 tight ends and 2 running backs, or 2 tight ends, 1 running back. He loves running those type of personnels. And if you could keep that personnel on the field and add in a receiver like Kyle Pitts, like, I love George Kittle, but Kyle Pitts is a more gifted route runner than George Kittle. He's going to be nowhere near the run blocker or the pass pro as George Kittle, but as a route runner, oh my gosh, he's a guy who could beat corners in the NFL. Yet he's going to have linebackers and safeties matched up on him. So where I would stand is like obviously Jimmy G would be the quarterback at that time if you took a Kyle Pitts. So there's no way Jimmy G cannot succeed if you had Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, and Pitts as your options. Like there's Jalen Ramsey in this division. Jalen Ramsey could only cover one of those four players. So and then you have a guy like Kyle Shanahan calling plays. So it was just a mixture of success if you took Kyle Pitts. So now a guy I look at potentially in like round 4 would be Brevin Jordan out of Miami.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So they pick at 3, 43, 103, and 118 the first couple days. Looking at the roster, what positions do you think they'll attack in kind of day 2 and early day 3? What positions do you think they need to attack?
So I think that's they could legit go best available, but they got to go best available based on positions you're trying to fill. So that would be interior offensive lineman. For my personal thinking, that's too soon. For pick 43, I think Kyle Shanahan feels the same way because he seems to value his tackles over his guards. So I would say interior offensive lineman, corner, at some point a safety. It's not as high on the list. Edge rushers you could look at, see who falls out of the first round. That's an edge rusher, like say Jalen Phillips from Miami falls. That guy's gifted, and if you put him on the D line with Bosa, D Ford at some point, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, like that, you get back to your 2019 formula as close as possible if you're able to do that. And so a third wide receiver is going to be great. And if you do select a Justin Fields, maybe you are running 3 wide receivers more than you were before. So I would say it just comes down to the best available player at that point. My guess is where they would lean more to would be the cornerback position. But if there's a top edge rusher that falls, I think they would go with that edge rusher. But second round, it's definitely a defensive player. Third round, that's coming via the comp pick for the Saleh hiring with the Jets. The same thing. It's going to be best available. It could be offense or defense. The best thing about the 49ers is those positions I listed in interior offensive linemen, corners, and wide receiver are probably their top 3. Well, this draft class is just stacked with those all throughout. Like Kendrick Green could be a 4th round selection, and he's a guy who could be a day 1 starter in the NFL out of Illinois. And then you also have like Austin Watkins Jr. He had 1 drop in his entire college career from UAB, and he's a very, very elite contested catch receiver. He's actually Sammy Watkins' little cousin. So he's able to have his cousin help him, understand the game behind the game in terms of the NFL. And he's probably a guy who's going to be a 5th to 6th round pick. Divine Diablo, I like as a potential safety if Tart doesn't, continue his career with the 49ers after this season. And Divine Diablo is a guy from Virginia Tech who's a kind of do-it-all safety. He gets comped to Cam Chancellor quite a bit because he wore 17 at Virginia Tech, and he's a very cerebral player. But we've seen him pick off Trevor Lawrence in the end zone. That's the bona fide number 1 overall pick that he's able to bait. He broke down the play that it was cover 2, but yet he was spying over in the slot, and he just read Trevor Lawrence the whole way and picked him off. So if you're able to play games like that with the number 1 overall pick, it just shows the kind of talent that you could find in the 4th to 5th round of this draft.
Yeah, for sure. And this draft is going to be very deep at receiver. It's going to be very deep at offensive tackle. It's going to be very deep at edge rusher. And you mentioned the DBs and probably most likely picking a defensive player in the second round. I saw earlier this morning the corner out of Syracuse, Ifeatu Melifonwu, who I've mocked in the first round. I really like him. He's probably going to finish in my top 5 corners. What do you know about him? And if you've seen him play, where do you think he could fit in your guys' system on defense?
Well, I actually got an opportunity to go to the Senior Bowl, so I got credentialed for that. Had the practices and saw him at the game. And what stood out to me is he's someone that could go cover on the outside, but then he could go cover inside the slot. So he's versatile. Where he fits in is, I think he could be one of those changeable pieces that the 49ers could do whatever the heck they want with it. If they want to use him as like a free safety, I believe he could play free safety as well. If they want to keep him as an outside corner and then bring him into the slot, I think they could do that as well. But I think he fits in more. Where I would place him is at least start him out is just strictly outside corner. Let him learn the NFL. Let him learn schemes that he's going to be going against, and keep him in one position because that's what the 49ers tend to do.
Yeah, and I was also I wasn't at the Senior Bowl. I did the virtual, and if we're talking about Senior Bowl guys, Elijah Molden, Benjamin St. Juste, who had a pick or who had multiple pass breakups
Yep.
in the actual Senior Bowl itself, Cameron Bynum, who I've talked to a couple defensive backs coach, who's like, this guy has like the greatest technique I've ever seen. So Bynum is a guy who I think my Cincinnati Bengals should be targeting third and fourth round. He has great hip techniques. There are a ton of DBs in this draft. I think last year's DB class was also very good. So this corner class specifically, I think is a lot stronger than the safety class.
Yeah, absolutely. There's guys that you're going to be finding starters on in the seventh round, probably at corner. Um, Also, I like Paul Adibo
Hmm.
from Stanford. The guy's 6'1". He's about 200 pounds, and I think he just ran a 4.4. And he's never really gave up many touchdowns. He's able to get interceptions, and he's able to play man. He's able to play zone. Um, so it's very, very deep, more deep at the cornerback position for sure than the safety position. The safety after probably the fifth round. So if you're looking to take a safety in the sixth or seventh, that's probably going to be more so a special teams guy rather than a starter. I think you could find starting corners in the sixth and seventh.
And then you touched on some edge rushers. I have like 15 edge rushers in my top 60. I mean, this class is ridiculously loaded and it's filled with depth. Like, I don't think the top two guys, Quiddy Pay, whether you have Phillips at 2, Ojulari at 2, Rosu at 2, but I don't think any of those guys are top tier guys. But going down the line, it's a ton of depth and a ton of guys who are going to be day one starters that you can get as late as round 4. I mean, going down the line, Ronnie Perkins, Quincy Roche, Jordan Smith, as you mentioned, Hamilcar Rashed from Oregon State, Peyton Turner from Houston, Cam Sample, who won defensive MVP in the Senior Bowl. Ton of edge rushers. It's a great year to need an edge rusher. If you need 2 edge rushers, you can do that too.
Yeah, I really like Ronnie Perkins from Oklahoma because how I look at kind of building the team is how what the 49ers are going to try to do. They're going to try to put a speed rusher on the other side of Nick Bosa. That was the D Ford signing. That was the signing of Samson Ebukon. Both guys aren't in the future, at least under contract wise, 3 years from now. If you select a rookie pass rusher, that rookie pass rusher is. So Ronnie Perkins, I believe his win rate, pass block win rate from 2019 and 2020 or season was probably, I think he was somewhere in the 4 to 5 range, somewhere in between there. And we're talking about going against guys like Chase Young stats, Kawiti Pay's stats, and Ronnie Perkins was right there. And that's someone I like to offset Bosa for if the 49ers are continually to put a speed rusher on the opposite side of Nick Bosa.
Yeah, and that would be scary, but especially with all those guys inside, just adding like a day one starter who can play behind Ebukam to start, and then eventually mold into that year long starter. Going to the receiving position, another great receiving class, and I think going in the future, most of these receiving classes are going to be very good because all these kids in high school, they're converting from DBs and they're playing receiver, and the position has never been more athletic. Like it's ridiculous. These guys 6'3" running 4.4s, 4.35s. It's ridiculous. And these wide receiver classes are going to be as deep as they are this year and last year going forward. How important do you think it is the Niners to get another weapon, whether it's a tight end, Jordan, or a receiver?
Um, so yeah, Breven Jordan, I would like kind of a bit to offset George Kittle and be more so that athletic tight end. I think it's very, very important, especially if you get a Justin Fields. You're probably going to open up the offense a little more in the pass game and have more three wide receiver sets or a tight end in a slot or something a lot more. Um, so there and it's really deep. A guy like is like Dwayne Eskridge, who's going in the fifth round. The guy just ran a 4.3, and what he reminds me of is the way his size is and the way he runs his routes is similar to an Antonio Brown. I'm not saying he's going to be Antonio Brown in the next level. I would never be able to say that about a prospect that hasn't taken one NFL snap. But just looking at his college film, I could see a little bit of Antonio Brown in his route running, the way he sets it up at the top of his route and creates that space naturally. Um, I forget his first name, but it's Bebe from Illinois. The guy's like 6'4". He his routes are amazing. He's a USC transfer. He's very physical. Oh, and he has like the record for the highest jump. If there was a combine, the guy gets up there. And to me, that's important because I look at the 49ers roster. They have no jump ball guys. So for me, they need to get a route runner that could get open fast. That's why I'm kind of on the Danny Amendola train, even though he's old. And then a guy that could just win a jump ball because that was Kendrick Bourne, but now he's a Patriot. So they don't really have that. Brandon Ayuk, he's more of your Stephon Diggs type finesse route runner. Debo Samuel's more of your Anquan Bolden, I'm going to box you out route runner. George Kittle doesn't really get up there. So if you get me a guy like Bebe from Illinois that could just jump basically over the Eiffel Tower, I'm with it.
So, also some other guys who will potentially be jump ball receivers: Nico Collins, Sage Surratt, couple other guys who I'm totally forgetting. But a lot of diversity in this class. There's route runners, there's slot receivers, there's jump ball guys. It's a very deep class. But one last thing. So picking at 3, you said that you think they'll go Justin Fields. Is Justin Fields also the pick that you would make if you were the GM?
Yes. If Zach Wilson's off the board, I would probably take him over Zach Wilson, to be honest. Just because Zach Wilson looks 100% healthy, but his stature is kind of built like a Nick Mullins, where he's a little smaller, skinnier quarterback and someone who's had injury history in the past. If a lot of moving off Jimmy Garoppolo is because of health, while Justin Fields hasn't been completely healthy himself, as we saw this past year's playoffs. He played through it, and when he played through it, he played at a very high level. And the way his build is kind of like Cam Newton light, to where he's not as big as Cam Newton, but he's not as small as Zach Wilson. So that's somebody I would love to have. Or he could be looked at as a taller Russell Wilson, the way his build is. So in the NFL level, I'm going to go with that guy because to me, when your body is that stature, it just produces more longevity.
Yep, a lot of good stuff here from Leo. Talked about Jimmy Garoppolo. Of course, the breaking news from yesterday, that the Niners moving up to 3. Talks some NFL draft and where the Niners could potentially go. Make sure to follow Leo on Twitter at LeoLuna93. Leo, thanks for adjusting for the breaking news yesterday, having to move this episode up a couple days. But thanks for coming on, man.
No worries. Anytime. I appreciate you. Thank you.